My name is John Passfield, and I'm going to read from my novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. The title of this reading will be Pauline Johnson, Video 13, Pauline's Poems, Part 1. Here's the cover of the novel, Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, a novel by John Passfield, a photograph of Pauline Johnson, the historical Pauline Johnson on the front cover. Here's a summary from the back cover. Pauline Johnson was born on the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, Canada. Was she American, British, or Canadian? Was she Mohawk, English, or mixed? She added up her assets and liabilities and decided that the Pauline Johnson the world would see would be Pauline, the performance artist, Pauline on stage. As for the real Pauline, she would keep that to herself. Here's a note on terminology. Such terms as Aboriginal and Indigenous were not in common usage at the time at which the events of the novel take place. To refer to her mother's people, the historical Pauline Johnson used the terms English and white. To refer to her father's people, she used the terms Indian, Mohawk, and red. While the novel's fiction, I have used Pauline Johnson's terms throughout the novel in the interest of historical accuracy. All people think, at the deepest levels of the mind, in imagery. The difference between non-artistic people and artistic people is not in the thinking process, in the non-use or use of imagery, but in the fact that artistic people dredge the imagery of the deepest levels of their minds up to the surface and present these images in patterns of imagery to their fellow humans in forms which we call art forms. Poems, plays, sculptures, paintings, films, and novels. In this case, the main character of this novel, Pauline Johnson, has presented her deepest thoughts in the art form which is known as a poem. I will read 4 Pauline Johnson poems which are referred to in the novel. The Pauline Johnson text is Flint and Feather, and here it is here, Flint and Feather by E. Pauline Johnson. My copy is dated 1974 when I was a 29-year-old high school teacher who was discussing these poems with my English literature classes. So I'm 76 now, you can do the math on that one. In each case, I'm going to read from the text of the novel a reference to the poem, but the poems are not quoted in full in the novel, in the mind of Pauline Johnson as she thinks of them. So I'll read from the novel, then I'll read the poem in full in each case. If we go to page 3 of the novel, there's just one line. It's the second paragraph of the whole novel. One line acting as a paragraph. A story. Whoops, I've got the wrong chapter here. I'll just move on now. An old lady watching a young girl. That's just one sentence, a one-sentence image. And if we go to page 123, which is the last chapter of the novel, Pauline Johnson in her mind repeats that image, an old lady watching a young girl. Now, that's also found in more detail on page 109 as an image. So the same idea, but in more words in the mind of the character Pauline Johnson. Sitting there on the porch, nice to have a bit of sunshine. Afraid to sit down unless I won't be able to get back up. Here comes that little girl again. Must be coming home from school. She always comes by at about the same time. Wonder if she'll smile again. She did it yesterday. What would she think if a toothless little old lady smiled right back? Now that's Pauline Johnson in the persona of a character in one of her poems, as we'll see in a minute. But if you take an x-ray of that, old woman looking at young girl, and you say to yourself, well, here's Pauline Johnson in Vancouver near the end of her life. She has cancer and she's getting worse in health. Looking back at her whole life, older woman looking at younger girl, it has a resonance when you take an x-ray. Even though in detail it's a character in a poem, a particular old lady and a particular young girl. Okay, if we go to Flint and Feather, page 36, we see the poem that she's drawing on when she thinks of these images. It's called Work Worn, page 36 in Flint and Feather. Across the street, a humble woman lives. To her, 'tis little fortune ever gives. Denied the wines of life, it puzzles me to know how she can laugh so cheerily. This morn I listened to her softly sing, and marveling what this effect could bring, I looked. 'Twas but the presence of a child, who passed her gate, and looking in, had smiled. But, self-encrusted, I had failed to see the child had also looked and laughed to me. My lowly neighbor thought the smile God sent, and singing through the toilsome hour she went. O weary singer, I have learned the wrong of taking gifts and giving not of song. I thought my blessings scant, my mercies few, till I contrasted them with yours and you. Today I counted much, yet wished it more, while but a child's bright smile was all your store. If I had thought of all the stormy days that fill some lives that tread less favored ways, how little sunshine through their shadows gleamed, my own dull life had much the brighter seemed. If I had thought of all the eyes that sweep through desolation and still smiling keep, that sees so little pleasure, so much woe, my own had laughed more often long ago. If I had thought how leaden was the weight adversity lays at my kinsman's gate, of that great cross my next door neighbor bears, my thanks had been more frequent in my prayers. If I had watched the woman o'er the way, work-worn and old, who labors day by day, who has no rest, no joy to call her own, my tasks, my heart, had much the lighter grown. So that's Work-Worn on page 36 of Flint and Feather. Let's look at another combination of the novel thought and the poem behind it. On page 36 of the novel, I'll just find it here. Yeah, we have this concerning her marriage. Now, this is part of an interview, whether real or imaginary, with a young reporter, in which Pauline Johnson says, "Marriage? Did I consider marriage? Well, let's just say that I was engaged and then I was not engaged." And that'll be enough to say about that. He was a young man whom I knew in Winnipeg. Well, of course, I was young at that time, too. Career, racial differences, change of heart. Which one are you guessing? Too young to know what we wanted? Later regrets? Or no regrets? Or little of each? I'll leave you to wonder what the story of my engagement might have been. Well, if we look at a poem in Flint and Feather, page 59, close by, it might illuminate that rather cryptic comment about her engagement in the imaginary or real interview. Close by, page 59 in Flint and Feather. So near at hand, our eyes o'erlooked its nearness in search of distant things. A dear dream lay, perchance to grow in dearness, had we but felt its wings astir. The air our very breathing fanned, it was so near at hand. Once, many days ago, we almost held it, the love we so desired, but our shut eyes saw not, and fate dispelled it before our pulses fired to flame. An errant fortune bade us stand, hand almost touching hand. I sometimes think, had we two been discerning, the bypath hid away from others' eyes had then revealed its turning to us now led astray, our footsteps guiding us into love's land that lay so near at hand. So near at hand, dear heart, could we have known it? Throughout those dreary hours, had either loved or, loving, had we shown it? Response had sure been ours. We did not know that heart could heart command, and love so near at hand. What then availed the red wine's subtle glisten? We passed it blindly by, and now what profit that we wait and listen, each for the other's heartbeat? Ah, the cry of love o'erlooked still lingers. You and I sought heaven afar. We did not understand 'twas once so near at hand. So that's close by, page 59 in Flint and Feather. Let's look at a third combination of the novel reference and an actual poem by Pauline Johnson. Page 101. Here we are. The one, she's referring to a poem. The one about the boy struggling in snow up to his waist. It means a lot to me. I don't recite it very often in the program, but I read it quietly in the candlelight in my room, often at the end of what I would call a difficult day. It's the kind of poem I'd like to have been able to read to my mother. She was a very positive lady, but there were times when such a poem would be a pretty good match for one of her moods. So let's go then to page 111 in Flint and Feather. Yeah, here we go. And the poem is called At Half Mast, HALF-MAST, At Half Mast, page 111. You didn't know Billy, did you? Well, Bill was one of the boys. The greatest fella you ever seen to racket and raise a noise and sing. Say, you never heard singing unless you heard Billy sing. I used to say to him, Billy, that voice that you've got there'd bring a mighty sight more banknotes to tuck away in your vest. If only you'd go on the concert stage instead of a ranching out west. And Billy, he'd just go laughing and say as I didn't know a robin's whistle in springtime from a barnyard rooster's crow. But Billy could sing, and I sometimes think that voice lives anyhow, that perhaps Bill helps with the music in the place he's gone to now. The last time I seen him was the day he rode away. He was going across a plain to catch the train for the east. Next day, 'twas the only time I ever seen poor Bill. They didn't laugh or sing, kick up a rumpus and racket around and chaff, for he'd got a letter from his folks that said for to hurry home, for his mother was dying way down east, and she wanted Bill to come. Say, but the feller took it hard, but he saddled up right away and started across the plains to take the train for the east next day. Sometimes I lay awake at nights just a thinking of the rest, for that was the great big blizzard day when the wind come down from the west and the snow piled up like mountains and we couldn't put foot outside, but just set into the shack and talked to Bill on his lonely ride. We talked of the laugh he threw as he went at the break of day. We talked of the poor old woman dying 1,000 miles away. Well, Dan O'Connell and I went out to search at the end of the week, for all of us fellers thought a lot that we darsn't speak. We'd been up the trail about 40 mile and was talking of turning back, but Dan, well, he wouldn't give in. So we kept right on to the railway track. As soon as we sighted that telegraph wire, says Dan, Say, bless my soul, ain't that there Bill's red handkerchief halfway up that pole? Yes, sir, there she was, with her ends flipping and flying in the wind, and underneath was the envelope of Bill's letter, tightly pinned. "Why, he must have boarded the train right here," says Dan. But I kinder knew that underneath them snowdrifts we'd find a thing or two, for he'd writ on that there paper, "Been lost for hours, all hope is past. You'll find me, boys, where my handkerchief is flying at half-mast." So that's at half-mast, page 111 in Flint and Feather. Let's look at a fourth combination of the reference in the novel, the thought of Pauline Johnson about a poem that isn't quoted in the novel in full, but is in her mind as a character. And we can look at it in the book. Page 62, first of all. I'll just find it here. Oops. Okay. Very short reference, just a thought, a fleeting thought in a mind. In her mind, in a 50,000 word thought, a 16 chapter thought, just this little 3-line thought. You had your suit all picked out, tailored perfectly to your taste. Color, ease of fit, cut to form. All you needed was a cravat. I was considered and cast aside, put back in the window by the clerk after you'd gone. And then to go along with that, page 94. A thought again in the mind of Pauline Johnson, the main character. I've never read your mirror frame to an audience. I never read it when alone in my room. And yet I know every word of that poem by heart. It has words that would singe my fingers, words that would burn my eyes. It is buried about the middle of the book. No one ever mentions that poem to me, and I never mention that poem to anyone else. It's as if that poem does not exist. And then if we go to Flint and Feather, page 121, the mirror frame. I'll just get the page here. Here it is, the mirror frame. So not quoted in the novel, but in the mind of the main character. Here are the words. Methinks I see your mirror frame, ornate with photographs of them. Place mine therein, for all the same, I'll have my little laughs at them. For girls may come and girls may go. I think I have the best of them. And yet this photograph I know you'll toss among the rest of them. I cannot even hope that you will put me in your locket, dear, nor costly frame will I look through, nor bide in your breast pocket, dear. For none your heart monopolize, you favor such a nest of them. So I but hope your roving eyes seek mine among the rest of them. For saucy sprite and noble dame, and many a dainty maid of them, will greet me in your mirror frame, and share your kisses laid on them. And yet, sometimes I fancy, dear, you hold me as the best of them. So I'm content if I appear tonight with all the rest of them. So that's your mirror frame, page 121. Here's something else I'll add. We'll go back to the novel in this case. Page 124. In the last chapter of the novel, when she's near the end of her life, has cancer, realizes she's getting worse, a 4-line poem that occurs to her. She's a poet. She thinks in poetry. It was just a tiny locket. She used to wear it on a chain around her neck. Then over a couple of pages. And it contained a tiny secret, a secret that no acquaintance ever knew. So the imagery that I wrote for her, the character Pauline Johnson, comes from the historical Pauline Johnson story. She wore a chain with a locket around her neck, the size that people in those days, and still do, I'm sure, put a picture in, a small picture. And I had her when she talks about her costumes, her Aboriginal and her non-Aboriginal costume, and her regular Pauline Johnson everyday clothes. She has a locket and she tucks it down inside so nobody sees it. And she says, well, it's the one thing perhaps that's authentic to me, but it's not seen by anybody. Well, when she died, the people who buried her had the opportunity to open the locket and see whose picture was in it. Her mother, her father, maybe a composite photo of both, perhaps her sister with whom she was at odds often in her life, Eva, or maybe this gentleman to whom she was engaged and somehow it ended. Nobody knows why. But the people who buried her, according to legend, did not open the locket. They respected her privacy and buried her with the locket. So that things like that give rise to the imagery of the novel as I write it. Okay, those were 4 poems that are not quoted in the novel, but referred to. Here's a note that I wrote in response to this concept. Excuse me, I'll just clear my throat. The premise of this novel, Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, is that the poems of the historical Pauline Johnson are also the poems of the fictional Pauline Johnson. Accordingly, the poems that are mentioned in the text of the novel, the poems that form the imagery by which the main character is thinking her way through the arc of her 50,000-word thought of the moment, are not quoted in full. They are known to her and can be known to a reader of this novel. They are known to the main character and are forming a layer of imagery below the surface of the text, which interacts with the imagery of the surface of her life and with the imagery of the depths of her life, as expressed in information which has been drawn from other topics. I hope that this novel stimulates an interest in the poems of the historical Pauline Johnson, for 2 reasons. Because the poems of the historical Pauline Johnson are rewarding as reading in themselves, and because the poems of the fictional Pauline Johnson form a layer of imagery in the mind of the main character of this novel, and an interpretation of her thoughts would not be complete without taking these poems into account. Well, Flint and Feather, I'm sure, is available, and you can buy a copy. Pauline Johnson is the way she expressed her name at the time. I had my own copy, of course, and didn't need to buy one. The novel from which I've been reading is Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, a novel by John Passfield. Have a look at Amazon. There's information there. Rocks Mills Press, ROCKSMILLS is my publisher. There's information there. If you go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, 2 books. A planning notebook in which I work my way through the writing process and record my challenges and some of the solutions I come up with, and a journal in which I record my thoughts as I polish the rough draft for a month or 6 weeks to make it the best novel I can possibly make it. So have a look at those at johnpassfield.ca if you're interested. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.